Okay, there we go. So, while we're on the topic of Paris, let's get into the left bank and talk a little bit more about where to stay and what to do in this particular part. So, we talked about some of the best hotels on the right bank, and we just kind of scratched the surface with the Arc de Triomphe and the Louvre and the Sacré-Cœur. And you can see how when you are on the right bank, especially if it is your first trip to Paris, lots of the things you want to do are really there. However, there are a couple of major icons on the left bank. So let's get checked into our hotel. Some of the best options, I think, in on the left bank of Paris are L'Hotel, which is Oscar Wilde's last home in Saint-Germain. And it's glamorous, it's theatrically decorated, and it's a secret hideaway set in a quiet street that's surrounded by art galleries and boutiques. It has an intimate bar with original works of art and this small but still sensational indoor pool. It's a short walk from the Musée d'Orsay, and the renowned designer Jacques Garcia's magic touch has created a warm and decadent bohemian feel that reflects the enthralling history of the property. The rooms are flamboyant with plush fabric-covered walls and stylish furniture, and it is located in the heart of the left bank, which makes it perfect for getting out and having one of those more like authentic Paris experiences if this isn't your first trip. We also have Esprit Saint-Germain, which is designed to feel like a private residence. It is also situated on the left bank in the heart of Paris. And behind its 18th century facade, this urban hideaway exudes a refined yet unpretentious ambiance. It's exactly what you would imagine a French hotel should be like. It's intimate and warm, stunningly designed, and they really put loving care into the 28 rooms and lounges here. When you arrive, you'll be welcomed by a friend and feel at home with dedicated and personalized service throughout your stay. Stop by the living room regularly. They always have complimentary drinks there by the fireplace, so you can dive in a little bit more to your French wines and cocktails. And then Relais Christine is a favorite when it comes to boutique hotels. It's tucked down a narrow street on the left bank, and it's a hidden treasure. Behind a set of wrought iron gates is this beautiful courtyard that's dotted with greenery, and it has a majestic honeystone townhouse. It was once a medieval abbey, and today it just oozes this period charm. Inside, old fireplaces, vaulted ceilings, and wood paneling hang with portraits that hint at the hotel's past. The individually designed rooms blend vintage glamour with splashes of contemporary style. And in the summer, the suite's private garden terraces are the perfect place to relax with an aperitif. If you're visiting in winter, the roaring fires in the drawing room will make you feel snug and cozy. And there's an atmosphere of spa and well-being with the old stone vaults. And all of these properties are quaint, they're private, they're beautiful. But there's one property on the left bank that embodies kind of that right bank glamour, and that's none other than Hotel Lutetia. It's an iconic landmark situated in the Saint-Germain area of Paris, and it's the only grand hotel that's on the left bank. The hotel was actually opened in 1910, and the building was a daring move from Art Nouveau to the emerging style of Art Deco at that time, and it still remains a left bank icon. It has a fabled past, and it quickly became a place where the anonymous could be found alongside the famous, where art, philosophy, science, and politics were continually created discreetly and without ostentation. Ernest Hemingway, James Joyce, Picasso, Matisse, and Josephine Baker were among regular visitors to the hotel. It underwent a huge renovation and just reopened a couple of years ago, and it's a true beauty. It has lots of these old fixtures that put the hotel on the map as an icon, but it's refreshed everything and redone everything to the point where you can actually feel that grand hotel ambiance when you visit. Then we've talked about the sites on the left bank. There is probably no site more recognizable when it comes to Paris than the Eiffel Tower. If the person sitting on that roof looks familiar, it's me. And this was one of the most beautiful sunrises that I've ever experienced in Paris. I went out there early in the morning and snapped some shots, and it was just so clear. It was like cotton candy colors and absolutely beautiful. The Eiffel Tower was built for the 1889 World Fair, and it stands 324 meters tall. It has impressive views of the city, but personally, I think visiting it from the Trocadero Square is the best way to see it. At night, the Eiffel Tower lights up, it twinkles. The very first time I was arriving in Paris, I arrived right as this started happening, and it was just this like magical experience and the perfect introduction into the City of Lights. The Musée d'Orsay picks up where the Louvre left off, which is 1846. So the works you see here are from the Impressionist period, and you'll see works from Van Gogh, from Monet, Renoir, Cezanne, and it's more of a transition into modern times. If you are traveling with children and you want to visit the museums and get your art history in, the Musée d'Orsay is a lot smaller than the Louvre, and it's a lot easier to cover more ground in less time. So I typically recommend this for families. I know the Louvre has the iconic pieces that you must see if it's your first visit to Paris, but the Musée d'Orsay tends to be a little bit more of a favorite with younger travelers. Then we have Saint-Germain-des-Prés, the iconic left bank neighborhood. It's famous for its café au lait, and the best place to try one is right here. It is in the 6th arrondissement, which is the little neighborhood where Saint-Germain's located, and works into the bigger picture of kind of Paris's spiraling neighborhood structure. And the broad tree-lined boulevard has designer boutiques. It has prestigious cafes and classic brasseries. And this is where you'll go if you really want that get lost in France experience, get lost in Paris experience. When you envision traveling to Paris and just wandering around and meeting people and hanging out in cafes, this is the place that you fantasize about. Some of the most popular ones are Café de Flore and Café du Magot, and both establishments were frequented by both Picasso and Ernest Hemingway, and are icons in the neighborhood. Then we have to talk about Notre Dame, which was unfortunately badly damaged in the recent fire. And Notre Dame is not on either bank. Notre Dame is actually on an aisle in the Seine in the center of Paris. It was completed in 1345, and it has been redone again and again with damage from the elements over the years, but it's the religious heart of the city. It's considered the finest example of French Gothic architecture on earth, and despite the large crowds, it's not hard to be awed by the famous stained glass and the gargoyle framed panoramas of the city. It's a must visit. I was there twice in 2019, and I was raised Catholic, and when I was there in March, I had plans to go to mass there one morning, and then I went and took pictures at the Eiffel Tower instead. But I was super heartbroken because it was in between. I was in Paris in March and September of 2019, and it was in between those periods of time that the oh my gosh, cathedral, that's the word, caught on fire. So It's one of my biggest regrets, but hopefully I'll have the opportunity again one day. But with that, we've already talked about some of the easy day trips from Paris, but there are some really great train trips that you can access from Paris as well. Bordeaux is another iconic wine region, and it's also a really quaint university town. It tends to be young, except you have these classic historic chateaus all over. It's about 3 hours from Paris, I think. And then we have Lyon, which is one of the culinary hearts of France. It's about just over a couple of hours from Paris by train. And it is your intro into the Provence region and traveling farther south to access those classic southern French regions and foods. And then we have Burgundy, which is the next stop on our itinerary today. That's a 3-hour car ride. And with that, as we arrive into Burgundy, you can kind of see from this map here, I'll let Adele talk a little bit more about French wine overall as we get into it. But here we have Paris. You can see Versailles right there. You can see Rouen is just to the right. And then we head down a little bit farther into Burgundy. But where we're going today is Chablis, which is this little northern part. So Adele, why don't you hop on and tell us a little bit about France overall, and then let's get into our final region of 2020.
Thanks everyone for hanging on for today. And you know, Paris is just amazing. And I was just typing into the chat, but like Daniel and I were in Marseille when the Notre Dame caught on fire, and we had just arrived that evening, and everyone was talking about it. It was on all of the news channels, all the TVs. Like, we had just checked into our hotel, had no idea what was going on. The bartender was, you know, talking about it, and like there was like whispers of like, of course, terrorism and this, that, and the other. And it was a very high stress. You could feel like the tension, the energy of people were very concerned. You know, it just goes to show like what an iconic monument and part of history, and just like people feel like it's a part of them, the Parisian or the French do. But we were all the way south in Marseille, but if you are looking at your map again, wine is made all over. Wine is fantastic. Everyone loves French wine. I know the map is could be expanded even further, so you could really like, you know, hone in on certain parts. Bordeaux, always famous for your Cabernet Merlot blends. But above that is the Loire Valley, which is that green region there. We've done some regions of the Loire before, and this is your Sauvignon Blanc, your Sancerre, and then in the south, along the Mediterranean coast, you've got Provence for rosé, you have Chateauneuf du Pape for your wonderful GSM blends, that's Grenache Syrah blends. And then, of course, you have Burgundy, which is Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, arguably the best examples of these grape varietals in the entire world come from Burgundy. And those who love Burgundy Pinot Noir, it is an expensive hobby. It's like chasing the golden dragon or whatever, like the, you know, chasing the rainbow or the golden chalice, whatever you want to call it. But it's always like even like the top master somms, it's like they're like holy grail of wine regions is understanding that of Burgundy. And most of it is because of a lot of the winemakers, they just don't tell you the secrets. It's just left between those and their family and their ancestors. They're not very forthcoming with information. And the wines, once you've had like a really well-aged Burgundy, it is unlike anything else in the entire world. So with that Burgundy, if you can circle that on the map, most of it is in the Côte d'Or, but this little bit up top is where Chablis is, and that's actually what we're talking about now. Chablis technically is closer to Champagne than it is to Burgundy. It's technically closer to the Loire Valley than it is to Burgundy. But the commonality that they share is that Chablis produces still wines of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. If you are, I think on the next slide there, the two wines that we're going to have today, we're going to have a red and a white. Chablis is known for primarily white wines, but one tiny appellation is permitted to do red, which is that of Pinot Noir, and we're going to taste one of those today. There's like only 11 producers of Pinot Noir from Arancy, and we get to taste one of them today, so it's pretty freaking cool. And then, of course, the Petit Chablis. If you want to open up both of these wines, go for it. If not, feel free to save them. I'm going to open up the Pinot Noir. I just tasted the Chablis a couple days ago. And also, there's just two of us, and now we have 3 bottles of wine open. Oops. So here's a close-up of the map of Chablis. See that river that runs right through it? That's the Yonne River. This flows directly to Paris. Chablis used to be the main wine region of Parisians. This is their go-to spot. It was the closest, easily accessible by small ships or boats to transport wine up the river towards Paris. And this is long before railways. It was long before any sort of other modern steam engines or freight trains or trucks, boats, planes, automobiles, whatever. And the wine region itself, I mean, dates back for hundreds and hundreds of years, basically to the year 1100. And the soil underneath Chablis is very, very unique. And I think we have another picture of that, next, which makes some of the wines like super interesting. So the soil is all chalky, white, decomposed parts of broken seashells. It's called Kimmeridgian soil. It's from one of the Jurassic periods. I can't remember exactly just one, but it's about 150 million years old. And all of these tiny little fossilized seashells of this like tiny little marine matter, like small little like clams and shells and like little snails. At one part during one of the glacial recessions, created this huge deposit of all of this marine life. And it makes amazing soil for wine. It is something that is super unique to the region. And it's like this limestoney, increases acidity in wines, which is fantastic. And so therefore we have our Petit Chablis for today. So our first wine of the still wines of today is Laventreau Petit Chablis. So Petit Chablis, what's the difference between that and Chablis and anything else? It's just a different appellation. It's just like a sort of a different like delineated area within Chablis that's called Petit Chablis. And then you've got regular, Chablis, you've got Premier Crus, and then you also have some of the Grand Crus. And most of the Grand Crus and the Premier Crus are planted on the Kimmeridgian soils, which we just saw. And they add a certain complexity to the wine that is completely unique to anywhere else in the world. If you have a wine that is like planted on these soils, it helps with acid. And when you have Chardonnay, which is a grape that normally is very easy to grow, it's easy to produce, and it also is something that's kind of a neutral vessel that lends itself to whatever it's being aged in. So if it's in stainless steel, it's going to be very like crisp and appley. If it's in wood, it's going to completely embrace all of the wood flavors of that oaky, vanilla, toasty kind of thing. But something that's very unique about Chablis is that they're very proud of the soil and the chalkiness. And so therefore, when you're aging Chardonnay from Chablis, they don't use a lot of new oak. They use neutral oak. And neutral oak is something that is like a used barrel. And used is after usually 2 to 3 years, a barrel no longer has those vanillin compounds in it. It's just gone. It's already, soaked up into other wines. So some estates might have 20, 30, 40-year-old used barrels. It's not just like a neutral vessel to age the wine in, and that's a characteristic of Chablis. You want to taste that chalkiness, that like freshly struck matchstick or that flinty kind of thing, because it's a characteristic of this region and you can't find it anywhere else in the world. So here we have Roland Laventreau. It's one of like the super cool, small, tiny producers that Kermit Lynch works with. There was probably 2.5 cases that came to Houston. You guys bought it. There's about 7 bottles left in the market. I actually just asked my rep if I could get some more of it. He's like, there's like 7 bottles. It's basically gone. So you guys are drinking or saving, whatever you wanted to, like a very, very cool small producer of Petit Chablis. I know that some people on this this episode or this call like are big fans of Kermit Lynch wines. So I definitely wanted to show this, which I thought was super duper cool. So originally founded by Roland, now his two sons have taken over of the vineyard, sort of like passing on that heritage of how to make these really cool wines and that sense of terroir, and making sure that everything is treated well from, wine is made in the vineyard. It starts in the vineyard as a product that you're farming. It's finished in the winery, and that sort of philosophy is carried through with this generation. Since joining the family operation, the two sons, they have really shown some remarkable precision, and these wines are really, really good. And I guarantee you, come 3, 4, 5 years from now, they're going to be like 3 times as expensive, because these wines are so good, mineral driven, precise, they're varietally correct, and they're just really freaking good. I definitely think that this is a producer.
Let me jump in real quick. How long would you hang on to this?
So Chablis Chardonnay and like Burgundy Chardonnay, or from Chardonnays from the Burgundy region, can age for just a little bit longer. If you like things that are a little bit more crisp, 3 years. I wouldn't really hold on to this maybe for too much longer than that, but I would definitely look for this producer year after year after year, because it's just going to get better versus actually like sitting on it for 10 years.
Cool. Good to know.
So of course, a great pairing with Chablis. You've got all of your shellfish and seafood and stuff like that. I mean, this is definitely a wine that calls for fish, white fish. Nothing too fatty, like things that are a little bit leaner.
And smoked trout specifically was what one of the things that we had talked about. And then Chablis is kind of known for, you can have oysters and shellfish, and those tend to be like really classic pairings with it as well. But tell us what kinds of cheeses you would put with this, because Chablis is one of those things that really pairs well with some like stronger flavored things.
So there's like a poisse, which is that soft, ripened, super funky cheese. There's cool blue cheeses like the one that we have pictured here. There's goat cheeses from the region that are a little bit soft, but specifically like those soft, ripened wash rind cheese. So a wash rind cheese is usually fairly young. They have a rind on them that's a little bit more of the like sort of like pinky, lighter brown tan kind of colors, and they're aged. They're maybe like 3 or 4 months old, and when they're aged in a wash rind solution, which is like a saltwater solution. They get washed like every day or every few days as they're sitting on the shelf until they're just ripe and just about ready. So if you're ever in France, they don't have rules like we do here in the United States about the age that you're allowed, or the FDA says you're safely allowed to enjoy cheese. I believe for us in the United States, it's like 60 something days. Like it's like a good 3 months is the youngest or barely legal that you could enjoy cheese. But you could actually really in France take advantage of any small farmer, funky looking. If it smells like a belly button, just try it. I promise it's like the best. It'll be the best tasting cheese you'll ever have though. Like that's just the best. And like this is definitely a wine, or Chablis is a really good wine that pairs very well with these soft, ripe and funky cheeses. I had a really good friend who did like a Burgundy trip, and at the small French restaurant, they were telling him like, they're like, how old is this Plus? How long has this been aging for? And the French guy in his French accent was like, oh, how long has D-Day been around? It's like it's been aging for this long. And so our friend ate it and said it was the funkiest, strongest, just like barnyard. It smelled and tasted like goat. Like how like if you're going to the petting zoo when you're a kid and how the goats smell, like that's what the cheese tasted like. That it was the best thing ever. It was so good.
I really like strong cheeses, but if somebody described a cheese as a belly button to me, I think that's where I would draw a line.
I know, but you gotta get past the nose. Then you taste it, and it's like creamy and savory.
Fair enough. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I've never heard anyone describe these cheeses like that, but
you're welcome.
Thank you for that. I'll keep that with me forever. Well, moving on to immersing ourselves in the Burgundy region. This is not quite in Chablis, it's actually much farther south, but Le Côte Saint-Jacques is a super famous 3 Michelin-starred restaurant and hotel in Burgundy. And it's truly a captivating destination. And if you are interested in actually spending time here, this is a really perfect place to stay and to just base yourself as you kind of explore the wine region. I mentioned kind of during our break that I had like just sort of an interesting little tidbit to share specifically about this hotel. So if you didn't know, last week I was invited to Cabo from one of my hotel partners to spend some time there, check out the property and the different experiences. And I personally love Cabo as a destination. I love the water activities and diving and everything. And I had been there for my birthday this summer. For those of you who were with us when we visited South Africa, I was in Cabo for that. And on my birthday, I went swimming with sharks with this French guy who has a company down there. So I joined him again for some more experiences this last week. And we start talking because we've done a few things together now. And he mentions that his father was a chef in France, and we're talking about Cabo restaurants. And then he mentions that his father worked at his father was a chef for like a Michelin-starred restaurant. And I asked him which one. He goes, well, it wasn't in Paris and it was in Burgundy. And I'm like, go on. and this was the restaurant where his father, who is now retired, he was not Jean-Michel Lorraine. At least I don't think. They don't have the same last name, but I think his father was one of the chefs here, which just seems like super interesting because he's one of my tourism partners who I plan trips with for my clients and who I do stuff with when I do my activities with when I'm down there. And I just thought that was such an interesting thing that I was like, oh, I think we're talking about that in I also, in addition to travel, I also have this show that I do about like wine and food and travel. And it was just super interesting how it's such like a small world. And it was this really just cool thing to kind of hear and hear a little bit about this restaurant from somebody who grew up here. And it is a Relais and Chateau property as well. So it meets those requirements for having like a certain level of service and this elevated status within the region. And this is the place to eat and stay during a visit to Burgundy. If you want something a little bit more mobile during your trip to Burgundy, one thing that is really cool and which I see kind of on the rise is barging. And we talked about this when we visited the Loire Valley, but Belmond in particular, the Belmond Hotel Group, which is owned by LVMH, they are now doing barge cruises, and they have 3 different ones going through all parts of Burgundy. They also do Champagne. They also do the Loire Valley. They also do Carcassonne, which is in like the south eastern part of the country. But they have 3 different barges that are in Burgundy right now, all with different itineraries. And they range from holding 4 to 8 passengers. So if you want to bring your hotel with you and just people you want to travel with, these are perfect options for kind of exploring the region and for checking out lots of different parts and for hopping to different wineries. There are also really amazing river cruises that are all over France. You can combine Burgundy and Provence with river cruises. You've got brands like Uniworld, Ama, Viking, and Crystal that all offer things down here. real talk when it comes to travel tourism, I don't necessarily see river cruises coming back super quicker than ocean cruises, but I think barging is something that will be really popular for if that's something you've enjoyed doing in the past. I think barging is going to be for you because it typically is on a more private basis. You're not exceeding like big group requirements or anything like that. It's really intimate. And so if you have put off these river cruises, if it's something, and if you're wanderlusting to get back here and to explore these regions, this is a way where you can really do that.
Hey, Kristen.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Price-wise, like if you had to cancel your, Viking River cruise or something like that, and you wanted to rebook and do like a private barge, is this equal or is this more or less?
It's more. There are ones. So the starting level would be the starting level would be like booking a suite. Well, actually, I don't know. So the starting level or the starting price point for these barge cruises is about $6,000 a person. And for longer itineraries on nicer ships, it can be as expensive as $20,000 a person.
How many people can you fit on a barge? I mean, like how many rooms is it?
So the Burgundy ones is 4 to 8. Carcassonne in the Loire Valley with Belmont's little fleet, 4 to 12. And there are some other companies that do up to like 18 people. Personally, I love Belmont, but there are more like there are other brands doing stuff as well. I just am a little bit more familiar with their particular process.
I'm thinking that this might be one of our first international trip ideas.
I actually was thinking about that too.
It would be with a small enough safe, group of you guys maybe who are interested, and we can all just like privately rent a barge, and that way we sort of keep our germ bubble to the one barge.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully the germ bubble will not be quite so. Hopefully the germ bubble won't be quite as big of a concern once more people get vaccinated and worldwide we see kind of this move there. But I do think it'll be a while before large group activities kind of come back. I don't think masks are going away on airplanes and in public spaces for a very long time. And that's just, I could be wrong, but that's just kind of my personal feel on everything as I've seen stuff unfold in the travel industry. But I do think barges could be a really perfect intimate first getaway for spring or summer of 2021 for those people who feel comfortable traveling once the world opens up. So we'll keep that in mind. But let's continue through Burgundy now that we, some of us have checked into our hotel and the rest of us are barging along the river. We've made it down from Champagne at the pace of 6 miles an hour. Let's get into this last line. Let's talk about this red and what makes it so cool and stand out as its little like sub red within Chablis, which is famous for its world-class whites.
Just thinking about chugging along at 6 miles an hour on a river barge too could be good for those who might potentially get somewhat seasick or motion sickness. It seems like you wouldn't, like you're just basically moving and not really moving.
And I think that's one thing that's cool about river cruising too. You don't get the seasickness or the waves the way you do with ocean cruising, but barging is awesome because your hotel is not like, it never moves too far. So you do have like this freedom to explore the region. It's just you and your people though. And you have this really like intimate experience. And I think seasickness is not an issue at all.
I'm just really into this barging idea. I think it's great.
I love it. I said this like a year and a half ago. I was like, that's going to be my thing. I can't wait. Sign me up. I'm here for it. Barges are in wine regions. They're food focused. and you can like ride bikes and stuff if you want to break from the eating. So to me,
Well, with that, let's talk about our, you know, ready to talk about our last wine of the night? I just popped it open. Domaine Saint-Germain from Urancy 2017. So what's really cool, and this is definitely like a wine nerd thing, is that the region of Chablis is almost fully, completely devoted to Chardonnay production, but only a very, very small part of it, specifically that of Urancy, allows for Pinot Noir. It's the only like red appellation that makes still red wine in France this far north. It's one of the only ones. So Urancy is about 15 kilometers from Chablis, and it faces directly west. Why is this important? Pinot Noir is super finicky. It needs to fully ripen to be delicious. If you face west, you get the most maximum amount of sunlight and warmth to fully ripen your grapes. But in sort of like the position of where they are, they're 60 kilometers from Sancerre, where they make Sauvignon Blanc. Like they're kind of like right in between the Loire Valley and Chablis. So here we are tasting an Urancy. It's a rather picturesque amphitheater-shaped part of Chablis that has a bunch of vineyards on it. The little town is super freaking cute. Domaine Saint-Germain is the producer here, is one of like 11 producers that we really see internationally, unless you actually go there and are tasting someone's like little wine in their backyard or maybe on the side of their barge. And but this is a producer. His name is Christophe Ferrari. Ferrari last name in like Italy is just like Cooper or Johnson. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that they're related to the Ferrari car family or anything like that. So Christophe Ferrari, obviously of Italian descent, finished his studies in the 80s, moved to Urancy and wanted to become a winemaker, and had an incredible passion for this region in particular, and sort of like, you know, unable to benefit from his own family's inheritance, decided to sort of find some people and some land and produce some really cool freaking wines from it. He currently operates about 26 hectares of vine, so not a whole lot, but still pretty small in the grand scheme of things. And he uses very traditional methods of making this wine. It's aged in oak barrels, just like you do sort of in your Burgundy from the Côte d'Or further south, and, you know, using clean methods and modern technology. When you look at this wine in the glass, it's clear. You can read the newspaper through it. It's this really pretty like garnet red color. It's bright. Around the rim, this is kind of an interesting thing. You can see there's just like a little bit of separation between the rim and the center. It's almost kind of like a watery meniscus. Sometimes this can be an indicator of a thinner skinned grape, or maybe like a higher alcohol content, or the fact that maybe the wine is starting to show a little bit of age and it's kind of like separating in the color spectrum, like things are kind of falling out a little bit. So on the nose, it's Pinot Noir. It's classically Pinot Noir. It's cranberry, it's cherry, it's bright red fruits, it's tart, it's got that sort of like Luden's cough drop, that raspberry kind of thing. There's definitely like a lot of sort of perfumey kind of characteristic to it. It's slightly floral, like those red flowers, but it's very soft. I think this is a very elegant wine. Compared to other wines from the Côte d'Or further south in Burgundy, this wine is a little less earthy to me. It's a little bit more like bright, fresh fruits, like tiny little like red currants. On the palate, if anyone else is drinking it, high acid, super tart. Would almost remind me of like if you like Lem at Valley Oregon style Pinots, you would really enjoy this wine. There's still some really good like juicy characteristic to it, but it's also still very tart. The fruit quality matches the nose. It matches that red cranberry, strawberry, cherry, raspberry cough drop thing that we kind of like talked about earlier. It's very, very drinkable. There's a little bit of spice on the finish, and this wine is a little bit warm. It's a little hot to me. Like I'm curious about the alcohol content on this because I think that it feels a little bit elevated. It's 13.5, so it's kind of fairly normal. Fairly normal to slightly elevated. I'd say like 12.5, 13% alcohol for Pinot Noir is pretty typical. This is 13.5 on this one. I think that if you were to blind taste this wine, you definitely put it in France. But I don't know if you necessarily put it in Burgundy because it doesn't quite have that same like forest floor earthiness that a lot of Burgundy does. I think that this wine is really nice and bright fruited. Is anyone else tasting this wine? Is there anything that anyone is standing out to them? If you're not drinking it because we just had a bunch of champagne, I don't blame you. You can always drink this one later.
I'm not drinking it, but I'm curious where, what do you think it reminds you of?
That's what I was saying. It reminds me of Willamette Valley. Like it reminds me of the cool climate Willamette vintage. Like, because it doesn't have that like sort of earthiness to it, like a lot of other Southern Burgundy from the Côte d'Or and further south. So we got a comment that says, when I poured, I was immediately surprised at that watery rim. Yeah, it's a 2017 vintage. So, you know, maybe it's just showing like a little bit of its age, or that watery meniscus can also be an indicator of the elevation of alcohol. So another trick that us wine professionals do, you just slightly blow into your glass, not too hard because it's going to splash it back in your face. If you blow slightly into your glass, observe how the tearing and the staining on the side of your glass occurs, and sheeting, I think is the proper term for that one. And if it's like a heavy sheeting, basically you just blew off the top bit of actual alcohol, and the more sheeting, the higher in ABV that there really is. Okay, so I'm observing kind of a medium amount of sheeting. Just as you blow in, that top meniscus kind of reflects across that back glass. Try this with other wines, but again, be careful your first time. Maybe make sure you're at home so you don't accidentally like blow too hard and it'll splash back in your face. Nice. So yeah, so like Julia just said, a lot of flavor packed into a light-bodied wine, which is my justification for saying that this reminds me of a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir because it has the juicy fruits. It's tart. It's got a lot of flavor to it, but it's still very light at the same time. I think that this wine could go with or without food. I really could sit on the couch and like watch. What are we watching right now? The Undoing. We just about finished. Yeah. I could sit here and just kind of like not think about this wine and finish that series and think about murder. So.
Always good to have one of those wines in your back pocket. Well, okay, so with or without food, what would you, so we talked about like wines to pair or foods to pair like traditional Burgundy with, and we discussed mushrooms and polenta among other things. Would you put this wine with that still, or do you think that's more of a traditional pairing? And after having this wine now, would you say maybe something a little different? Or what are your thoughts?
I still 100% stand behind Pinot Noir and mushrooms being a classic pairing for each other, no matter which spectrum they lend. New World, Old World, tart fruits, super earthy. Pinot and mushrooms always go well. And so we talked about just like a nice, like creamy, cheesy polenta with some like fresh mushrooms on top. Yesterday for lunch, actually, I made like a really nice like cream sauce with some shiitake and oyster mushrooms with a little bit of like chopped up bacon and some Gruyere cheese with like a little like cheesy noodly thing, which would be really good too. Another really good pairing for this, duck confit. Some sort of like very like hearty roasted small bird, if you're ever into like Cornish game hen, sometimes they have them on sale at the local stores, like 2 for $5 or something like that. And you can just, I mean, they cook so fast. Yeah, just like a nice roasted poultry.
And we talked about fatty fish too, like salmon and stuff that's a little like more meaty.
Yeah, so some fishes that have a little bit more flavor, a little bit more fat to them, because again, this wine still has really good acid to it. So like the fattier fishes, the more creamier and mouthfeel is a little bit richer. The acid in the wine will cut through that and complement it. You know, some red wines can go with fish, and I think that this is definitely one that can go with more, fatty pink fish like salmon,
Mm-hmm.
swordfish, tuna, stuff like that.
Would you age this wine at all, or do you think this is kind of a drink it?
It's already at 2017. We have to realize we're about to be in 2021. I mean, this wine's basically, it's almost, 4 years old, and thank you, math. I think this wine is super delicious out of the bottle. It's very drinkable. And I worry if aging this wine that the fruit is going to diminish and the alcohol is going to come out more.
Interesting.
There's not a lot of backbone to this wine. I think that this is definitely something to be enjoyed within the next year or two.
Okay, awesome. That's one thing I always like to know with the wines that we bring on for the show is which ones to hold on to and which ones to drink like very soon. And my mom writes the drink date by on the back of the label. And I keep telling myself I'm going to do that because my husband will be like, hey, can we open this? I'm like, no, I'm holding on to that one for a while. But it's good to know, like, I've got to get organized. But I think that's something that's really cool about the wines that we have here. Like, there is a good mix, and we're buying stuff now. And for those of us who do like to kind of collect stuff and hold on to it, there are some good options. And this is one of the, let's get into it soon. Yeah? Adele? Uh-oh. Oh, Adele's computer just died. She just texted me. Well, we'll give her a second to get back on, but I think that kind of segues into the next part of our itinerary today as we kind of wrap things up. And we talked a little bit before about Paris as being just an international hub and going really well with so many places. As a travel advisor, one of the challenges that I face is people wanting to combine places that don't necessarily make sense, whether it's because of the layovers that are involved getting there or how many trains you have to switch. And so if you want to travel by train through Europe, some of the best destinations that you can combine with Paris are Brussels in Belgium, which is only an hour and 17 minutes from Paris, London, which is just over 2 hours, and Amsterdam, which is just over 3 hours. And so none of these destinations are huge time commitments. You can also get like to Geneva and some places in Germany, but these are the major cities that you really can combine. And depending on if you're traveling with as a couple or with small children or with teenagers, a different combination of these cities can work really well. Brussels and Amsterdam paired with Paris, I think, are really great for high schoolers. London and Paris are really great if you're traveling with littler kids. London, Amsterdam, and Paris now, with Amsterdam having the direct train to London, and with KLM and Air France being partners and us in Houston having direct flights to both, you can start in Amsterdam, go to London, then end in Paris by train and take direct flights in and out. And so that's one thing I'm always looking for. What makes sense and how do we spend the least amount of time in transit? Another thing I spoke about was bigger international trips and how I like to do layovers, longer layovers in Paris and in London and in Amsterdam and in these cities where you can tack on to like more exotic destinations. And so if you're traveling by air, some places that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't, I think we'll start in the middle with the Amalfi Coast via Naples. If you're traveling to Italy from the United States and from Houston specifically, you are connecting through another city. Houston doesn't have any direct flights. So if you're going to Naples, you're probably going through Paris. And if you're flying, and so a common trip that I tend to do is having people start in Paris and then go down to the Amalfi Coast, do Sorrento, Positano, Ravello, these little iconic cities along the coast, maybe throw Capri or Ischia in there, and then fly home from Naples via Paris. And it really minimizes the your time in transit and your layover time. If you're going a little bit farther away to North Africa or to the islands in the Indian Ocean, you can actually get to both Marrakesh and to Mauritius with one stop, and that's through Paris. And because of the travel time, Paris is 100% a place that you can tag on a 2 or 3 night stay in addition to one of these more exotic, bigger bucket list trips. So last year, the second time I went to Paris was in September, and that was a layover trip. That was part of a bigger trip that I did going to Marrakesh. Morocco as a country is super exotic. It's so interesting. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I think the desert and the mountains and the culture and the history was super special. And it was a really eye-opening trip. And then finishing it off with a couple of nights in Paris before coming home was kind of a nice little segue back towards the West, where I started there, then I went to the Sahara, worked my way back to the city, and it was kind of this huge decompression and then a mild introduction back into life as I know it. And then Mauritius is one of the islands in the Indian Ocean. It is a super unique island, specifically for its snorkeling and diving. If you see this picture here, there's an underwater waterfall that is visible by drone footage. And the island, you can stay on different parts of it, but this is a spectacular destination. And it is not as hard to get to as you might think. So Mauritius, the Maldives, the Seychelles, these are all these Indian Ocean islands that are huge bucket list destinations. And for American travelers, we think they take a lot of work. But Mauritius is actually super, super safe, and it isn't that hard. There's a lot of travel time, but you can tag on a trip to Paris on either end of your trip. And so that's a way to extend it a little bit. If you have 10 nights or 12 nights, that's really doable without having to spend a bunch of time connecting through all these little airports. And it's pretty straightforward and not a place you necessarily would expect. Well, with that, I know Adele was going to try to jump back on.
I've been back. Sorry.
Okay, you're here. But those are a couple things that I wanted to touch on from a travel perspective before we leave, because Paris is always a good idea, and you can always tack it on to much more comprehensive and unique itineraries, and you're never going to run out of things to do. We are so grateful for all of you guys who have joined us from the beginning and who we've picked up along the way. And we will be continuing Talk, Taste, and Travel in 2021. It might look a little different. We'll be talking about ways to kind of elevate the experience over the next couple of weeks. I've been working on a survey. Adele and I are getting together to talk about the future of the show. So stay in tune with your email. And if you guys have any feedback, any stuff you really love, any stuff you think we could improve on, any things you would like to see different, and it could be in terms of regions, places you want to visit next year virtually. And it can be as simple as like, hey, can we make it half an hour later and half an hour shorter, or whatever it is. We want to hear your feedback about all of that. So email me, email Adele, our contact info is there. We will post on YouTube through the remainder of the year, and we can't wait to see you guys in 2021. Happy holidays, and thank you guys